My name is Christopher Upton. I'm a 2017-2018 Fulbright Fellow. I've been in Taiwan studying Taiwan's legal system in collaboration with Academia Sinica and the Taiwan National Museum of Prehistory. I'm home-based at Indiana University, Bloomington, where I'm a Ph.D. student in cultural anthropology. My project is entitled Culture on Trial, Rights and Rule Crafting Processes in Taiwan Special Indigenous Courts. Taiwan has recently created some special indigenous courts which are designed to accommodate indigenous cultural differences and secure indigenous judicial rights. I'm here studying how these courts are crafting rules about indigenous customary practices and how indigenous litigants themselves are using these courts to advance their own concepts of culture. In terms of preliminary results, the first thing is that Taiwan's special indigenous courts are ontologically ambiguous entities in the sense that judges and lawyers are unsettled about what these courts are really doing and how they're different from the ordinary legal system. The second finding is that the work to make these courts ontologically salient and kind of visible is the same work that enables them to become sites of knowledge co-production, negotiation, and mediation across numerous social divides. And the third finding relates to these courts as well as law generally and how law is embedded within a larger set of legal ecologies and social fields. We understand that the efficacy of legal frameworks depends upon how much the court system and legal system is supported in terms of its understanding of fairness and being fair institutions. What we don't have as much information about is how indigenous claims and indigenous sovereignty affect the system. So we have, for example, many states have created statutes that then accommodate indigenous cultural differences. We have many states that then try to follow international customs and norms about indigenous claims and community rights. We have some states that create indigenous courts to accommodate these differences. What I'm studying is about how these courts craft rules and how they contribute to the efficacy of the legal framework in creating a trusted legal framework involving indigenous communities. My project has attempted to understand how these special courts create a more effective legal framework and secure indigenous justice, so building knowledge in that case related to indigenous courts and their role in the efficacy of legal systems. I built long-standing relationships with indigenous communities in Taiwan, as well as with many institutions, for example, courts and government offices and legal aid centers. In terms of diplomacy or citizen diplomacy, I've had an opportunity in many cases to talk about the United States because for many of the people that I've interacted with, I'm the first American that they've ever met, and for many of them, I'll be the only American they've ever met. So it's an opportunity for me to build a relationship between Taiwan and the United States. Probably the biggest roadblock came last year during an earthquake. So Hualien, the city where I'm situated, receives a lot of earthquakes, and we got a really large one at some point earlier this year that then toppled buildings, it killed a number of people, it buckled streets, closed down businesses. And for me, that was difficult because it limited my access to my research on research sites in terms of the courts, going up to the villages. But what I found that was most helpful for me was just following the locals' lead in this. So our neighbors, for example, all slept in their cars for a few nights because of worried about aftershocks, so we followed their lead. We figured out how to get water when there was water that was not, the water supply was diminished, and how to get food. So getting over those roadblocks, a lot of it has been following the locals' lead and understanding kind of the local culture has been very helpful. Probably the most memorable time I've had in Taiwan was being upstairs in my house and hearing our neighbor who was in our house, our neighbor friend, talking to a little girl in Chinese. And I was thinking to myself that I didn't think anybody was here because it was kind of late. And so I went downstairs to check on who was in our house at the time, and it was my little 3-year-old daughter. I was having a conversation with our neighbor friend in Mandarin Chinese about her favorite toy, and I was absolutely floored. I had no idea that she understood the vocabulary or how to build sentence structures, but she was having a little conversation, and it was, as a parent, a very wonderful experience. I grew up in Taiwan as a kid and living in Taitung, so this is an opportunity for me to come back and see a transition, for example, from martial law to democratic rule. So Taiwan for me is a place that includes old China and new Taiwanese. It includes multiple ethnic groups, indigenous communities, the Hakka, the Hoklo, and the Mandarin Chinese. It's a place with beautiful mountains and beautiful ocean with bubble teas and Euro Mian. It's just an absolute gem. So I would tell people you must go visit Taiwan.